I'm sorry, dear, this is a family-only trip. Patricia's voice was sweet, almost warm, as she slid the vacation itinerary across the dinner table. I looked down. My husband Daniel's name was printed there. His sister Tara. His brother Nate. Their spouses. Even the children were listed. My name was not. I looked up. Patricia was smiling. That polished, gentle smile she wears when she's doing something deliberate and wants it to appear kind. Around the table, everyone found something else to look at. Daniel's aunt stirred her tea. Tara shifted in her chair. Nobody said a word. And Daniel, my husband of 6 years, sat right beside me and did absolutely nothing. He didn't correct his mother. He didn't look at me. He reached for his water glass and took a long, slow sip, as if this moment meant nothing at all. I smiled. I don't know how, but I did, because something inside me went completely still. Not broken, not tearful, still. The way air goes quiet before a storm chooses exactly where to strike. I had been left off the list, but sitting at that table, I understood something clearly. This was not a mistake. This was a message. And I was finally ready to send one back. Patricia wasn't done. She looked around the table, making sure she had the room, then spoke louder, with the warmth she uses when she wants her words to sting but still appear kind. You'll understand when you have real roots with us. A few people chuckled, not because it was funny, but because awkward laughter fills space when nobody wants to acknowledge what just happened. My chest tightened. Heat crept up my neck. I had responses ready. Calm ones, sharp ones, honest ones. I swallowed every single one. Of course, I said. 2 quiet words. Patricia nodded like I had agreed, like I had accepted my position without negotiation. She picked up her fork and moved on, and the table followed her lead. I kept eating. I kept my face pleasant, but I watched Daniel from the corner of my eye. His jaw was tight. His hand moved slowly around his plate. He knew exactly what his mother had done to me in front of this room. He had simply decided not to do anything about it. That, not Patricia's words, not the missing name, was what hurt most. My husband had witnessed it all. He had chosen silence. And silence, I was learning, had its own particular kind of weight. That night, after everyone left and the house fell quiet, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for Daniel. I had given myself the whole drive home to breathe. When he walked in, I asked him plainly, "Why didn't you say anything?" He stopped, looked at me, then exhaled slowly, like I was the one making things complicated. "It's just easier this way," he said. "Easier," I repeated. He sat and rubbed his face. "You know how my mother is. If I push back, it becomes a whole production. It's one trip, Adrian." But easier meant easier for him. Easier for Patricia. Easier for everyone at that table, except me. I was the one who had to absorb the insult quietly, and apparently, that arrangement suited everyone just fine. "She called it a family trip," I said. "And you let her leave me off the list. Use the time for yourself. It'll be fine." I looked at him for a long, careful moment. I looked at the man I had chosen, the man I had built a life beside. And I asked myself the question I had been avoiding for years. Was this a marriage? Or had I been living as a permanent guest, tolerated, but never truly counted? Sleep didn't come. Memories did. They arrived fast and sharp, like someone flipping quickly through photographs I wasn't supposed to see. Christmas 4 years ago, when Patricia organized a family portrait. I found out from Tara's social media the next morning. Daniel's birthday dinner at his parents' house. I drove 45 minutes and arrived to find the table set for everyone except me. Patricia laughed lightly. She must have miscounted. The family group chat I was never added to. Holiday recipes passed just between us. Nate's graduation dinner that Daniel mentioned 2 days before, almost accidentally. I had made excuses for every single one. Patricia needed time. She was old-fashioned. She would come around if I stayed patient and kept my voice low. 6 years of patience. 6 years of pleasant. And here I was, left off a list in my own dining room while my husband called it easier. This wasn't a woman who needed more time. This was a patterned, careful, deliberate, and consistent. Each small exclusion fitted neatly against the next, like tiles in a design I had been too close to see. I had been quietly erased. One dinner, one list, one missed invitation at a time. And I had helped it happen by never once saying, "Enough." 2 days before the trip, I was making tea when I heard Patricia's voice from the hallway. She was on the phone with Tara and hadn't realized I was home. I stood completely still. "She's temporary," Patricia said easily. "No need to include her in everything. Daniel will come around eventually. These things sort themselves out." Temporary. I stood there and let that word settle. It wasn't quite a shock. Somewhere underneath my years of patient smiling, I had always sensed Patricia saw me this way. But hearing it spoken aloud in my home, in that casual, certain voice, made something inside me go cold. I set the mug down, without a sound. I walked upstairs, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. My hands were steady. My mind was clearer than it had been in years, sharp in the way that comes when you stop hoping things will improve on their own and start deciding what to do instead. 6 years of quiet. 6 years of absorbing small cruelties dressed as oversight. Patricia had made one serious mistake in that hallway. She had assumed my silence meant I was powerless. She had been making that assumption for 6 years. She was about to understand exactly how wrong she was. I want to be honest. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for clarity. Before making any real decisions, I needed to understand where I stood financially. So I opened the folders I had always trusted Daniel to manage and started reading carefully for the first time. It didn't take long for something to feel wrong. The shared household account showed outgoing transfers, amounts I recognized, but the numbers didn't match what Daniel had told me. The grocery budget he quoted was lower than actual charges. Utility payments were higher. There was a recurring transfer to an account I didn't recognize. I pulled 3 months of statements and placed them side by side. For 6 years, my income had gone into our joint account, and I had trusted Daniel to manage it completely. I had never questioned it. Now I was looking at everything properly, and what I saw didn't match the simple picture he had always described. I made a fresh cup of tea and kept reading. I wasn't panicking. I was paying the kind of attention I should have been paying all along. Because something quiet and certain told me that the numbers on these pages were about to tell a story nobody in this family had ever planned for me to hear. By the time I reached the third folder, my tea had gone cold. I found investment accounts I hadn't known existed. Opened in my name, signed with my signature, managed entirely by Daniel. I traced the deposits carefully. The original capital came directly from my salary. My money quietly moved and quietly grown under someone else's control. There was a property investment, too. Daniel had mentioned it briefly, twice, calling it his family's deal. Both times he waved it off like a minor background detail, nothing I needed to track. But my name was on the ownership documents. Not as a formality, as a legal co-owner, because the founding deposit, the one that made the entire purchase possible, had come from our joint account during a period when my income was the primary source flowing into it. I sat with that for a long time. For 6 years, I had felt like a guest in this family. Temporary, as Patricia had so casually confirmed. But these documents told a completely different story. I hadn't been passing through. I had been quietly funding this family, their lifestyle, their investments, their property. They had used everything I offered, then left my name off the list. The morning they packed for the trip, I was cheerful. I made breakfast. I asked Tara if she needed a phone charger. I helped Daniel find the travel adapter he always misplaces. When Patricia arrived, I walked her to the door with a warm smile. "Have a wonderful trip," I said. She gave me her gracious, slightly satisfied look. "Thank you, dear. We will." I waved until the car turned the corner. Then I closed the door, leaned against it for 5 seconds, and walked to my desk. I had spent 2 full days thinking, not reacting. Everything I had found in those financial folders needed to be handled carefully, legally, and without a single rush step. No drama, no scenes, just precise, quiet action. I already had a notebook with 3 pages of organized notes. 2 names written down, a financial advisor and a family lawyer a colleague had mentioned 2 years ago. I had kept that number in my phone. Someday had arrived. I opened my laptop and began making appointments. My husband was miles away on a vacation I hadn't been invited to. That gave me exactly the window I needed. Whatever came next, I was going to be ready for it. The lawyer's name was Ife Okonkwo, and she had a calm, measured way of speaking that made me feel immediately like I was in the right place. I brought everything: printed bank statements, investment records, property ownership documents, and a written timeline of 6 years of contributions. She read through it all quietly while I sat with my hands folded. When she looked up, she simply nodded. "You have legal standing in more places than you realize," she said. Patricia called the following morning. I had expected it. The sequence was always the same. Daniel panics. Daniel calls his mother. Patricia calls to straighten things out. I had watched this pattern play out over smaller things for years. She didn't bother with a greeting. "What exactly did you do?" Her voice was controlled, but irritation ran underneath it. "Can you be more specific?" I asked. "You embarrassed Daniel in front of his family. Do you understand what that looks like?" "Daniel's card was declined because he needs to cover his own expenses," I said. "That's responsibility, not embarrassment. You're making a scene over vacation." "I haven't made any scene," I said. "I've been very quiet, actually." A pause. Then, with her familiar authority, "This is not how family handles things." And there it was. Family. The word she had used for 6 years as both a gate and a weapon. She kept me out with it when it suited her. Now she was invoking it to ask something from me. I kept my voice flat. "You're right," I said. "Family handles things differently. Family also doesn't describe their daughter-in-law as temporary. But here we are." The silence on her end was long and deeply satisfying. "We'll talk when you're home," I said, and ended the call. The day after Patricia's call, I met with Ife again. I had been reviewing the property documents, the real estate investment Daniel had always described as his family's deal. The more I studied the figures, the more significant my position appeared. Ife confirmed what I had suspected. The founding deposit, the amount that made the purchase possible, had come from our joint account during a period when my salary was the dominant income flowing into it. The paper trail was clean and unambiguous. My co-ownership wasn't a technicality. It was solid, documented, and legally beyond question. I owned a meaningful share of a property that Patricia and Daniel had treated as entirely theirs. They had made renovation decisions, discussed rental arrangements, without once acknowledging that my name appeared on the ownership documents. Ife leaned forward. "If this marriage were to dissolve, or if you chose to formally assert your stake, you would be negotiating from a position of real strength," she said. I sat with that sentence. I hadn't come looking for an exit. I had come for truth. But truth shows you things people were counting on you never to see. I drove home slowly, with a completely different understanding of who held power in this family. It had been me, all along. They came home 3 days early. I heard the car in the driveway and looked out. Daniel's expression through the windshield was tight. Patricia stepped out first, shoulders rigid, posture already arranged for a conversation she intended to control. I had made tea. 3 cups on the table. Daniel walked in first, dropped his bag by the stairs, and moved into the kitchen without meeting my eyes. Patricia followed, closed the door carefully, and stood in the entry hall a moment, looking slowly around. Then she looked at me. "We need to talk," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why I made tea." The room felt heavy as they settled. Daniel with arms crossed, Patricia with hands folded in that composed posture she uses when she wants to signal she controls what happens next. I poured the tea and sat across from them. Something close to peace settled in my chest. I had dreaded this moment for years, the two of them aligned, facing me together. But the dread had always come from not knowing what I was working with. Now I knew everything. The accounts, the documents, the ownership papers, the lawyer who had confirmed every detail. I had come to this table completely ready. Daniel started. "You overreacted," he said. "Disrupting our finances while we're away is not okay." "I redirected my own salary to my own account," I said. "Those are different things." "You know what I mean." "I'd rather be precise," I said. Patricia stepped in smoothly. You created a mess over a vacation. Daniel's card was declined in public. That's humiliating. I understand that was uncomfortable, I said. She's overreacting, Daniel said, almost to his mother, like I wasn't sitting right there in the room. And then Patricia, with the same calm certainty she had carried for 6 years, said it again. She's not family, not cruelly, quietly, like a settled fact, like a diagnosis everyone in the room had already agreed on. I looked at her. 6 years of swallowed responses moved through me. Every dinner where I smiled through exclusion. Every of course I said when I meant the opposite. Every bill I quietly paid. Every document I had signed. Every time I convinced myself patience would eventually be enough. I reached for the folder on the chair beside me. Let me show you something, I said. My voice was steady. The folder was ready. So was I. She walked me through it carefully. The investment accounts in my name were legally mine, regardless of who had been managing them. The property ownership was solid. The founding deposit traced clearly to our joint account during a period of documented joint income. My co-ownership was not a gray area. It was clean and fully established. I asked what my options were. She outlined them, without dramatizing. I didn't have to act that day. But I needed to understand what I owned so I could make real decisions about my marriage, my finances, and how much I was willing to keep contributing to people who had decided I was temporary. I drove home feeling something unfamiliar. Not powerful in a loud way. Just grounded. Certain. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel like a guest. The photos started appearing on day 2 of the trip. Patricia's page. Tara's page. Even Daniel's, which he barely updates. Beach photos. Restaurant photos. A group shot on a yacht. Everyone laughing perfectly. Tara's caption. Family is everything. I looked at each photo carefully. I expected the familiar ache, that low, quiet hurt of being the one left out. But it didn't come. What arrived instead was something close to clarity, the kind that comes when fog finally lifts and you see exactly what's in front of you. These people had never planned to make room for me. Not truly. While they raised glasses to family, I was at my kitchen table with a highlighter and legal documents, confirming what I owned and planning my next steps with the kind of precision they had never expected from me. I worked through most of that evening without stopping. Every move had to be documented, legal, and clean. Nothing impulsive, nothing reckless. By the time I went to bed, the first real actions were already in motion. They had left to enjoy a trip. I had stayed behind to do the most important work of my marriage, taking back what was always mine. The first thing I did was the investment accounts. Aoife had confirmed they were legally mine. I contacted the financial institution, provided my identification, and formally asserted sole management rights. Clean. Official. Completely lawful. Then I opened a personal account in my name only and redirected my salary deposit there. For 6 years, my income had gone straight into our joint account, one Daniel managed without my full involvement. I had never questioned it. I was questioning everything now. I didn't close the joint account. Too sudden, too obvious. Instead, I changed where my money arrived first. My salary went to my account. Whatever I chose to contribute to shared expenses would come from a deliberate decision, not an automatic transfer. It felt strange. Like learning a new posture after years of slouching. But it was right. I documented every step, every transaction, every date. Not to build a case against anyone specifically, just because I had learned 6 years too late that in this family, I needed records. Because what was said at the table and what appeared in documents had rarely matched. Daniel was still sending cheerful messages from the trip. Sunset photos. A short clip of the kids at the beach. I replied with a small heart, and kept working. The next step was the bills. For years I had quietly covered expenses nobody had formally assigned to me. Subscriptions, utilities, a grocery delivery account that always had Tara's address saved in it. A streaming plan Patricia had been added to 2 years ago, without discussion. The phone plan that included Nate as a family edition I had generously approved. Small things, easy to absorb. The kind that disappear when you're the person who just handles it. I stopped handling it. I went through every recurring payment and separated what was mine from what was ours, and what was ours from what was quietly. Actually, there's the grocery delivery tied to Tara's address, cancelled. Patricia's streaming access removed. Nate's phone plan edition ended. I want to be clear. I did none of this out of spite. I was simply, for the first time, paying for what was mine and nothing more. Putting down what I had been carrying without being asked and without being thanked. The interesting thing about quietly holding a household together is that nobody notices the weight until you set it down. By the fourth day of their trip, the cracks had already started forming. Daniel texted on day 5. It started casual, asking me to check the joint account because something seemed off. I read it and set my phone face down on the table. 20 minutes later, the card was declined at dinner. What's going on? Then a call. I let it go. I called back 30 minutes later. I restructured some things while you were away, I said. Finances are being handled differently from now on. What does that mean? His voice had gone tight. Look at which expenses are yours and handle them. We'll talk properly when you're home. Adrian, we're in the middle of a trip. And I'm in the middle of sorting our finances. Handle what you need to. I kept my voice even throughout. No raised pitch, no sharp edges. Just the quiet tone of a woman who had made her decisions and wasn't going to be argued out of them over the phone. He tried different angles, frustrated, then almost gentle. I held my position through every one. When he ran out of new ways to ask the same question, I wished him a good rest of the trip and hung up. I sat still for a moment. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me, and then it didn't. I placed the first set of documents on the table. This is a summary of my financial contributions over the past 6 years, I said. Monthly deposits, shared expense payments, and transfers toward joint investments. My voice was even. No drama, just clear words beside clear numbers. Daniel looked down. A flicker of unease crossed his face before he covered it. Patricia kept her eyes on me. I've been contributing more to this household than you were aware of, I continued. More, in some cases, than Daniel told me himself. I didn't know the full picture until recently. Now I do. I slid the second sheet forward. This is the investment account Daniel opened in my name. These are the original deposits. My money, managed without my knowledge. Daniel's jaw tightened. And this, I said, placing the third document on top, is the property filing, with my name as legal co-owner. The table went quiet. Patricia's eyes finally dropped to the page. I watched her scan it carefully. I watched her find my name on the ownership line. I watched her expression do something I had never seen in 6 years. It wavered. I've been funding more than you think, I said simply. Their confidence, that settled certainty that they held every card, fractured. I kept going. I walked them through the investment accounts, the original capital, the growth figures, my full legal rights to both. I walked them through the household expenses I had absorbed without agreement. Then I laid out the property stake. I hold legal co-ownership of this property, I said. Not symbolically. Legally. Your lawyer can verify these documents at any time. The room was completely silent. Daniel looked like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him belonged to someone else. He opened his mouth once. Nothing came out. Patricia sat very still. For the first time in 6 years, I could not read her face. The composed, gently superior expression she had worn through every dinner, every dismissal, every small cruelty, it was simply gone. Then she recovered. She straightened slowly, lifted her chin, and with remarkable composure for a woman who had just had everything rearranged, she said, "Money doesn't make you family." I looked at her carefully. I nodded slowly. I had been waiting, almost without knowing it, for her to say exactly that. Because that line was where her argument ended, and it was precisely where mine was about to truly begin. She held my gaze when she said it. I think she expected it to land the way her words always did, with quiet finality, just enough elegance to close the discussion and return me to my usual silent place. I had watched this work for years. I let the silence sit between us, long enough that she might have thought she had succeeded. Then I looked at her, not with tears, not with anger, not with any emotion she had prepared to manage, and I responded. Her expression shifted. Because Patricia had spent 6 years preparing for one version of me. The version that apologized. The version that swallowed everything and smiled afterward. She had never prepared for this version. The one who had sat with a lawyer, read every document, separated every account. The one who arrived at this table already knowing every answer before a single question was asked. The version that was no longer requesting a seat. The version that already owned part of the table itself. Daniel was watching me now, truly watching, with something in his expression I hadn't seen in a long time. Patricia, for the first time in 6 years, looked like a woman who didn't know what came next. I let the moment breathe. Then I spoke. I agree, I said. Money doesn't make you family. I paused just long enough. Respect does. I set both hands flat on the table and spoke. Not quickly, not emotionally, steadily. The way you speak when every word matters. I talked about the Christmas portrait I found out about through social media. The dinner table where Patricia miscounted my seat. The family group chat I was never added to. The holiday recipes shared just between us. The graduation dinner Daniel mentioned 2 days before almost by accident. Every moment I had cataloged quietly for 6 years while telling myself to be patient. I laid them out, item by item, occasion by occasion, without raising my voice, without crying, like evidence, because that's exactly what it was. Every word landed. Daniel was no longer looking away. He was listening with the focused expression of someone hearing the full truth about themselves for the first time. Not a managed version. The actual truth. Patricia's mouth opened once. Closed. For a woman who had never been at a loss for the right word, the silence from her side of the table was the loudest thing I had ever heard in that room. She had no defense. Not one. Daniel broke the silence. He didn't try a speech. He knew anything polished would sound like an excuse, and he was past needing to manage the moment. He looked at the table for a long beat and then said quietly, I didn't protect you. Just those 4 words. Plain, honest, and clearly costly to say in front of his mother. I looked at him carefully. I saw, maybe for the first time in years, the man underneath the habits. Not the one who always chose the easier path at uncomfortable family moments. The actual person. He looked tired. He looked like someone who had just seen the full length of a pattern he had participated in and did not like what he was looking at. Patricia said nothing. She was looking at her hands. I think she had expected Daniel to find his way back to her side, to reframe, to defend, to eventually help turn the situation around. When he didn't, when he sat with his regret instead, something fundamental shifted in the room. But I was careful. Because a moment of honesty is not the same as a change. I had seen smaller softenings before, brief, then gone. This time I needed more than a moment. I needed a real decision. I took a steady breath. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. But I am finished accepting what is not acceptable. I laid out my conditions, not as requests, as facts. First, I would not be excluded from family events, decisions, or plans. Not framed as optional. Not left off lists. If it was a family gathering, I was family and my place at the table was not subject to Patricia's approval. Second, our finances needed to be reviewed, restructured, and fully transparent. Every account, every investment, every property document. No more management without my knowledge. No more contributions without my complete understanding of where my money was going. Third, Patricia needed to understand, directly, without softening, that her treatment of me over 6 years was something I would not continue absorbing. Respectful behavior was not a preference I was asking for. It was the only path forward I was offering. If these things don't change, I said, I will make the decisions I need to make about this marriage, about these assets, and about my future. I didn't say it as a threat. I said it as a fact. Calm. Certain. Daniel nodded. Slowly but clearly. Patricia was very still. The only question left was what they would do with their choice. The days that followed were different. Patricia didn't transform overnight. I hadn't expected that. People with deep habits don't change completely because someone laid documents on a table. But something had shifted. The breezy, untouchable confidence was quieter. She stopped using family as a measuring tool. She didn't bring up the trip. A week later she called, not to manage anything, just to ask if I wanted to join her and Tara for lunch on Saturday. I said I'd think about it. That was true. I hadn't decided. And I didn't know anyone's speed. Daniel did harder work. We sat down together with a financial advisor, his idea which I noticed, and went through everything. Every account, every investment, every contribution. It was long and sometimes uncomfortable. We got through it. He apologized again later that week. More fully, not just for the trip, but for 6 years of choosing easier over honest. For letting his mother set the terms of our marriage without asking whether those terms worked for me. I accepted it carefully, with the understanding that acceptance was a beginning, not a conclusion. For the first time in 6 years, I stood inside my marriage as an equal, not a guest, a person who belonged there, and finally knew it. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. No dramatic scene. No satisfaction watching Patricia crumble. Real power doesn't need an audience. I simply started living differently. I spoke when I had something to say instead of measuring whether the room was ready. I stopped softening truths people should have been sitting with. I stopped funding what I hadn't agreed to. Slowly, in quiet layers, the dynamic changed. Not because I forced anyone, but because I stopped shrinking to the shape they had decided I should take. When I stood at full size, the space rearranged. It had to. Patricia is trying. Some weeks better than others. We may never be close, but she is no longer casual with her cruelty, and that is enough. Daniel and I are doing the real work, slow, honest, sometimes hard. I don't know where we land, but I know where I stand. She said I wasn't family enough to travel with them. Now she knows exactly what it means to lose the person quietly holding everything together. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe to my channel. More stories are coming. Hit that notification bell. Drop a comment. Have you ever held everything together while being treated like you didn't belong? You are not alone. See you next time. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you.